Hi guys, my name is Borodante, and welcome back to Overpain. Which means I go through my Patreon page and check out as many submissions as you guys sent to me during still March. We're still going through March, and it's insane 15 submissions you guys sent to me. Today we're gonna go through another 7, which will add up to 9 down and 6 to go. And I'll try to give you some advice and maybe fix something in your artwork. First patient is Q. Hi Q. Hi Boro, I love your work and watching your videos has been super helpful for my art. Glad to hear that. For this painting, why is this not liked? I like each one that I went through. For this painting, I really wanted to capture a lighthearted and happy feeling. I usually avoid doing backgrounds, so I struggle with environments a lot, and I feel like there could be big improvements made in regards of value and composition. Thank you so much for all that you do, and all the best to you and your loved ones. I hope you're staying well and safe. We're doing our best. Now, let's see what I could do with your cool and very happy looking artwork. Right after a quick word from this channel sponsor Wingfox and their new course called Everything You Need to Know About Drawing and Painting the Head. Your lecturer Salem Shanoa is a CG artist, illustrator, and a 3D modeler. He has a huge experience in illustration as well as 12 years in art education, and he will share with you everything he knows about how to draw a head, starting with understanding the subject and the difficulties and complexity of the human head, then breaking down the complex head into smaller and easier parts to understand, including all the proportions, measurements, and basic shapes that'll let you build any head you want. But what I like about this course is that it doesn't stop there. The next chapter is about organizing this knowledge and actually make it quick and easy to understand how to build the head in 3 different methods to actually get closer to the final result, fast and easy. The course also includes working with extreme angles, expressions, different age, body size, and ethnicities, as well as different art styles like anime, comics, and Disney art. And the final 2 chapters are about rendering the actual values and turning your drawing into an actual painting of a portrait. In the final 8 lessons, you go through 2 real-life examples of creating portraits of a man and a woman in different angles and lighting. So if you're interested in this full package of a course, it's available right now for only $49, that's 51% off before it's fully released. So it's a good time to go ahead and start following the course, and also you can find an extra 15% discount code in the video description. Thank you Wingfox for supporting this channel. Now back to the video. Alright Q, let's have a look. So I definitely want to go through the main characters and the tree trunk to make things look a bit more realistically and 3-dimensionally lit, and maybe do a few fixes with the geometry. I don't know why, but I really feel like since the angle is obviously a little bit from the bottom, we're seeing like a lot of the bottom of the foot, you know, and we're obviously like on the level of the tree trunk. There's definitely needs to be a little bit more of an angle like this, you know? Like, it doesn't have to be gross or anything, but still, we need to show the bottom of this cylinder or something. And as I think of it, a bit more of a complex shape on things. Like, generally you do think about shapes, but like just on this dress, I feel like a little bit more life to the way, you know, the cloth acts would make things a lot more interesting looking, because really it feels like something's wrong there when things are so simplified. Like, there's definitely a place for a simplified art style, but in this case, this simplified shape is not exactly expressive or something. It doesn't bring like an idea of like, I mean this to be a simple shape, like in those cartoons with very simple things. Like this hair kind of has that feeling, you know? But in here we have very detailed and sort of like realistic, a lot of detail going on in the wrinkles and rendering of this cloth inside of the dress, but the edges of it are so simple. Like, how is all this complexity going on here when this is so simple? So yeah, doing a little bit of that. I know this probably looks a bit weird to have such a strong It's like she's stealing something from a store, put it under the dress. And yeah, automatically, of course, I'm immediately removing some of these outlines. And I can see that they may lead to some issues with, the character disappearing into the background. Although, not really, as I'm doing it. Everywhere we can still see the character pretty well. But yeah, that's one thing. I'll also cut out the characters from the background, like with the tree trunk probably or something. But another thing I would like to work on is maybe some compositional choices. Like one thing that's definitely bothering me is this tree that is so close to the edge and like touching it lower as well. Maybe I'll remove it altogether and it will be just showing up a little bit and actually the whole tree is growing somewhere on the right. It may cause other issues. Of course, I'm, fixing the composition when already having to think in details, so I'll have to do it and then see if I need to balance out something else after this. Like, one thing I'm expecting to happen is maybe generally the feeling will be that all the trees are sort of falling to the left now, but not really, it looks kind of fine. Like this and this sort of repeating, but I can make that tree falling the other side. I don't think that will make a lot of an impact in the composition though. Yeah, also the clouds are going that way, so that's maybe why it's all feeling kind of balanced. Also, what Nadia and I both immediately noticed is that she's kind of about to fall down from this tree trunk. She's really stepping onto the plane that is really like she's gonna fall. It really feels that way, this is the main point of the picture. This is where the action is happening, and it's slightly off and it's a bit unnerving because of that. So I'll lower the edge of that tree trunk just like that to make it feel more like she's actually stepping on top of the trunk. And in here, I'll fix the geometry, like flatten out the edge of that far foot. That's a right foot, so it's a little bit on the right side. So it's sort of behind the horizon of that tree trunk. And now it'll feel a bit more balanced out, I feel. Alright, I feel like it's time to cut out the characters. I'll probably grab the whole foreground, so these trees, the trunk, the characters, this bush, that tree as well, and everything that goes below these bushes and the tree trunk. Now I'll probably add a little bit of that green tree like that behind the arm. I feel like it will be a little bit more pleasing if it wouldn't be like so almost touching the character but not really. When you're looking at the silhouette of the character, it almost perfectly ends where the tree starts. That's a bit unpleasant. You wanna, if it's overlapping, let it really overlap. Overlap enough for you to see that overlapping at this distance or something. And here's like, also I'll tone down the contrasts in here a little bit next to the high contrast character. And another thing I like doing, if we have a really close values going on, like in here, and these are not like important objects. So a thing to do in this case is actually totally embrace the lost edge and literally blend into the background completely. And suddenly, instead of a problem, you're having this very artsy moment. And not to mention that we're next to the edge of the character, so it's a good thing to stop fighting with it. Yeah, this is not that important, but I feel like if I would be doing it, I would do it this way. I feel like the shadow from the feet in here is a little bit out of place. And first of all, because the angles are a bit weird for it, but mainly because you have this Fresnel reflection going on the edges of the tree. And they are blocked by the shadow from the feet, like in here especially. This has no excuse because the Fresnel reflection is reflecting something from over there, the sky that's over there. The shadow that is being cast from the character has nothing to do with it. We're not looking upwards, we're looking way over there when we're reflecting in this case, because this is the edge. The edge has this very strong angle going on that's shooting very far into the background. And the shadows only block the reflections, the highlights that are coming from the light source that is also casting this exact shadow. And in this case, it's not gonna happen because the shadow is, if not from the sunlight, we don't really, go for it apparently, like we're like in the shadow of the trees or something, which is a good choice, by the way, because in the actual sharp sunlight, this would be, first of all, harder, and secondly, not as good with dark shadows on the face or something, So having a softer, like, skylight is a good idea, but the sky is really, really big, and the reflection is reflecting something over there, like that part of the sky, while the shadow is being cast by all over the place, so there's definitely no reason to block the reflection. That's what I'm trying to say. So I'm sort of approaching it a bit more like the reflection on the wet floor, when it would be sort of kind of like this, the foot would be reflected, just to illustrate. That would be going on a very flat, big square or something. But in this case, we're on a very round surface, so all of this fun stuff is ending really fast. But still, you see, I'm blocking the reflection only where the foot is actually in the way of the reflection that is trying to see the sky, not here. And this is the situation where, like, the reflection is more important than the shadow cast by the character because of the strong angle. At strong angles, it's much harder to see lighting and much easier to see reflections, especially on a dark surface. Generally, it's not super reasonable to do the Fresnel reflection on a tree trunk. It's a very rough and bumpy surface. It wouldn't actually, I would actually myself go for a much more rough rendering and just going for something darker. So that's another way to do it. I'll actually also emphasize it a little bit. But generally, if we want to just have, nice reflective kind of tree trunk, maybe it's, there are types of trees that have smooth tree skin. This stuff, it could be smooth. So in that case, definitely it's pretty reflective, but not like here, probably only at an edge, since it's not wet, I assume. Got a bit carried away with this tree trunk. I don't know if it's making it better or worse, but I'm just trying to make it look like a generic tree trunk. Because we already saw what a glossy one would look like, and I'm thinking maybe this is a better choice. A lot less expressive of a shape, I can tell you that much. I went into texture while sacrificing the shape design. So yeah, the same thing from the little creature, a deer sheep. But yeah, I won't be blocking, emphasizing the shadows that much, and instead will work much more with the reflections. But yeah, right here, if there's some shadow cast from it, and we can do the same kind of stuff from the young lady here. And yeah, let's give it a try at removing the outlines. Because you mentioned you wanted to improve values aside from composition and background. And one thing that leads to improving values is definitely giving up any traces of outlines. I never actually said it specifically this way, but if you want to improve your values, there should be no outlines. Because outlines really make it hard to understand what exactly, things feel a lot more satisfying when they're wrong if you have outlines. I noticed you sometimes do this thing where values kind of curve away at the edges of objects. Well, generally this could be the thickness of the cloth in a way, but really that thickness is like a winter jacket thickness. So at this distance, I wouldn't go for that. But even aside from that, in here, like, why does this bright value of this plane is just stopping at this point? Like, really going to the end would look much better, because obviously the shape is going straight. It doesn't curve away like that. And same thing here, in some other places as well. So I'm gonna make this leg, the surface of the leg, a bit brighter than this bottom edge of the raised leg, because, well, obviously this is facing a bit higher than this. Also, the sun is from that direction, so some kind of reflected light would be hitting it more than this one. It's more of that reason, probably. Also, it will probably get brighter on that side already, facing all kinds of sun there. Or not sun, sky. Let's make it a bit more translucent, like this color. Maybe a bit cooler, just for fun. Oh, that's a cool color. I even will leave a little bit of the original color to have a nice color abstraction or something. Since it's not a straight shape, some folds will be sometimes casting shadows and minimizing that translucency. So yeah, right here as well, right? I don't know how much of that wasn't, yeah, it wasn't the original. Like, this is just facing the bright stuff, so it's gonna be bright stuff. In here, it's curving downwards a little bit, so I'm gonna make it darker. And then it goes bright again, because it curves upwards, like it went up, down, and then up again, sort of. Not that strong, but you get the point. So let's see what happens if we follow all of this. With the boots, again, this thing, like, it's not an outline, but just the shading just curves down. It's like halfway outline, and this is also halfway outline. Interesting how that's a thing. So yeah, just go for it, go to the end with the shading of a plane. Oh, these boots are so gloriously red now, looks kind of cool. So yeah, on the torso here and on the arm, I went through all the places and just removed, sort of stretched the middle values to the edges. And that's something I probably recommend doing. So if you're thinking, like, you're approaching the edge, you're thinking, should this value keep going on or not? Like, really question it first. If there's no particular reason, like, this is facing at a certain elevation, you know, this is facing the same way. There's no difference between this and this. No sudden shadow cast on it, like from this arm. No, wait. Arms have nothing to do with this, obviously. So this is just the same torso lit by the sky. There's little change in value or anything. So it will just stretch this color onto this, like, it won't be changing. The only thing that may start happening is the reflection of the sky, you know. If this would be kind of a glossy thing, that would be going on the edges, especially on the darker side. The brighter one, like, it needs to be like a very, like, latex sweater to reflect all that. But yeah, on the dark side, it's hard to imagine a sweater doing that, but let's say, you know, if we just don't care and want to have nice shiny reflections everywhere that just look nice and dictate the angle of the surface, you know, when we want to say that something's facing away, we add reflection, and it immediately means that, okay, it's facing that background, and that's why we're getting this color here. But only on the dark side. The brightly lit red, just, it will dominate over that, whatever the amount of reflection we can get from that background there. Though at the same time, like, it feels like sunlight, actually, if we really, like, wanna be perfect about it. Such a brightly lit color is probably lit by the sun, not just the sky. So otherwise, if it would be lit by the sky, it would look a lot more like this. It would be actively darker than the sky at all times, because the light source should always be brighter than the object that is lit. Well, it's kind of a stretch with the sky, because sky is not too bright, but it's really, really big. So any particular point of the sky may be not as bright, but all together, all that light will be lighting up. Let's say if the surface is white, yeah, it will be in any case brighter than the sky, I think. Well, yeah. No, I'm not sure. That's like a question. I keep thinking about this stuff a lot. And usually there are examples of both ways, like sometimes the object will be altogether darker than the sky. I'm talking about the situation when there's just skylight and no direct sunlight on the character. Will that character at any point on their surface be brighter than the background of the sky? I need to look up some photos. So here's the guy in the sunlight, and his arms are definitely brighter than the sky. But here's a lady in the skylight, and she doesn't have a single point on her surface that would be brighter than the sky behind her. In here, also, like he's a bit, like the brightest spot is a bit darker than that sky. But you could find some kind of cloud. Thing is, it's also like cloudy. But you see what I mean? Like if there's no sun on the object, like in here, immediately, right? The person is getting brighter than the sky because there's super bright sun that is adding the light, and it's not here at all, so the sky can be a lot of the times darker than the object in the sunlight. But without the sunlight, yeah, it's overall darker. Even with this overly photoshopped, saturated orange hoodie here, it's still like the contrast is with the hoodie being darker than those clouds. So the parts when I can definitely tell that this is overcast, like really, because here this is sunlight. In this case, it's getting brighter, but with overcast, even white surfaces will be still darker than the sky behind it. Let's push it to the limit. So let's say white flag on sky overcast. There's no photo like that. Yeah, they're all in the sunlight. Who the hell takes a photo of a flag in overcast? Well, there you go. You see, this is overcast. And this white flag is actually darker than the sky. Here's another overcast scenario, so also white doesn't get brighter than the sky. Still though, you can't be 100% sure, because what if there are examples where it wouldn't do that? Like here as well, you know, it's all definitely darker than the sky. Here's one example, but it's because it's a photo of in like a very stormy, rainy weather or something, and there's a specific dark cloud behind it. And probably the rest of the sky has much brighter spots somewhere. That's why the lighting on it is sort of directional, it's sort of from the top a lot. Because at the top there's somewhere much brighter clouds. So this is just an angle that uses the background of a very dark cloud that is not going on everywhere. If the whole sky would be dark like this, completely like some kind of ecological disaster, this would be darker than that background. There, I guess this is it. This is enough examples. So yeah, the fact that we are legit getting really bright, and of course red is not getting brighter than the sky, but this color definitely dictates that this is sunlight. Like it's only not brighter than the sky because it's deep red and not even close to being like a bright color. So another value thing in here, just going for the very edge. Otherwise, it's actually pretty good values. And I don't blame you for, you know, like it's sunny rendering, but it doesn't have like too much of sharp shadows. Even in here, maybe it's just because of this kind of approach, we have this soft, like really soft shadow starting softly from here. In reality, like if we're rendering sunlight, it would be this kind of shadow, you know, like really sharp. Because this is a very short distance and the sun is generally pretty sharp. And yeah, things like that would happen a lot. And generally it's just that sunlight is pretty hard to render, so making like this bright yet somehow soft sunlight is something people do. I do that myself sometimes. I don't know. Right now, if I would be making a painting in sunlight, I would definitely be going for a lot of sharp shadows and a lot of terminators. So, like, you have a terminator, that's for sure. I remember you kind of had it, although it looks kind of like cell shading more. But generally, like, you know, having the sunlit side and completely not sunlit side. That's something that's definitely important to do. In the skylight, if we would be in the shadow, this thing would be really soft, right? But since the sunlight, we're getting this very sharp edge. I talked about it before in those videos about rendering, lighting, and whatever. I talked about how a lot of artists, myself included, until very recent time, were completely avoiding terminators that need to be pretty specific if the lighting is sharp, like skylight for instance. And actually, to avoid terminators, like, the light needs to be so soft, it needs to be like almost a head sticking out of the window into just an overcast thing. That's where you wouldn't be getting a terminator. But right now I'm sitting in the soft light. You can kind of see that terminator going on somewhere, and that's a soft light. If it would be just one light bulb, it would be much sharper. So it happens a lot more than one would think. Light doesn't go too soft. Well, in natural environment, if there's no sunlight and only skylight, then yeah, it's definitely happening a lot then. But artificial lights rarely get that completely terminator-free lighting. And if you really can, you know, handle it and work with it, show those terminators well, it actually looks really cool and confident when you do that. So the arm is raised, so probably some kind of cloth stretching going on in that direction. And because of that, a bit less of the loose or like extra cloth the way it has here, right? This shape. In here it will be straightened up a little bit because the arm is raised and it's using that cloth kind of, not too much, but it would be nice to show that. And yeah, if we're going for this being the sunlight and is kind of from the top left, then this side is not in the sunlight. And it needs to be definitely actively darker than the sunny part, I think. Like, if we're going for that. There's a lot of questions, I'm just answering all of them in one example. But yeah, it would be darker like this, and you see, this way, the skin color is darker than the sky now. So yeah, something like this. It's definitely time to move on to the next piece. So that's the progress I got. A little bit more of a removal of outlines on the scarf would do wonders, but generally, I feel like if we focus on the bottom half of the body, it looks like kind of a next level of resolution. Much higher detail, much sharper. Now I can definitely tell that this leg is growing from something else a little bit. So it would be a good idea to, you know, raise it kind of like that. But that's some little things. Second patient is James Carney. Welcome back, James. Bro, hello, thank you for your past overpaints of my submissions. This is a painting of the cast from the show Critical Role. I took an early promo photo of the cast as my reference, although I added the bear. Always a great addition. And then tried to change their outfits somewhat to be like the characters in their new TV show, Legend of Vox Machina. Oh, that was the part that, like, I thought, why couldn't I find actual characters, like those specific fantasy characters? These are the ones. Well, it's not that important, of course, but, like, good to know. The mystery solved, which specific characters they're meant to be transformed into. I changed some things but kept some the same. I then made that background like a medieval tavern as best I could. Painting anything without a reference is a challenge, so I had to alter the shading from my reference photo and try to build the background. I'm interested especially in any lighting shading comments or anything that might make the background better. For instance, the lighting by the fireplace, think I could have made much stronger and that would be more interesting? Question mark? As always, your help is appreciated. I love these episodes. Borrow my thoughts are for you and your family in this difficult time. It seems trivial to talk about art, but here we are. Thank you again, Jim Carney. Edit. The painting took 30 days to do with a ton of correcting along the way. There's no bad time for art. Let's start. Alright, James, let's have a look. This is a super hard composition, like the amount of work and like attention to detail necessary here is insane. So like, good workout, I would say that much. I did recognize quite a few of the actors. I'm not sure, like, I feel like there's definitely some of them. There's not more people, there's 8 of them, and here there's also 8. But like, who's this guy? Really hard to tell. Like, this guy is maybe him. I think it's him. The big gray blue guy is probably this one. Like, I also saw this picture, but as far as I understand, this show is about these voice actors taking on different roles every time. I love this character. So this is this actress. This is the only person I know from all of this group of people. She played Ellie in The Last of Us, meaning she was her voice and her motion capture actress as well. And she's like a dwarf here, I assume. I recognize this guy. This one is probably this main mage. And this lady is over here, I assume. And she has a certain perspective slash just volume under the hood issue. And this elf probably is this lady, because there's no other ladies left. Also in here, she's probably even more alike with this character. But yeah, still no idea who this is. This one looks like a lot older than any of them. Maybe this guy, if he wouldn't have a beard. That's like my only theory, I guess. Well, he's again the only one left. Anyway, generally the likeness is there. I feel like overall they're all pretty good. Like, it's just that the rendering feels like I looked at them before reading like your description or anything. I immediately recognized that they're all made from photos. And the main reason to that is that the lighting on them all is kind of from the front, like it's all separate on each one, and the perspectives are all separate. And this particular face really gives it away. This one also a little bit. I think the main problem here is that you sort of copied the faces, but where you had to completely change the headwear or the hairstyle, it didn't fit really well with what the head was before. So I would just go ahead and try and increase this volume a bit. Let's see what happens. Because generally, it's like starting from the most critical thing that I see. Like this face and a little bit this one as well. And both of them have the issue of not working very well with their haircut. Aside from that, there's a lot of issues with the brushwork and shape design and just rendering of lighting, I guess. But that's like, well, it's copied from photos and not very experienced way of doing that, maybe. But generally, it's like, okay, but there's just a few mistakes like this that really make things look a lot worse than generally the picture could be with what it has. These are my thoughts, at least. I'm not sure if I'll be able to fix anything, of course. So I removed this ugly line that I talked about in the previous video. Don't draw this sharp line on top of the nostril. That's never gonna end well. I will still keep it as shading, but don't emphasize this part at all. Like generally all these wrinkles around the face, you probably saw them in the photo, but really compare the amount of contrast that was in the reference and how much you put into it. In your case, it's almost on the level of scars. And like in here, we can see these wrinkles, but that's a smile. Without a smile, we like we don't see that at all. And maybe I'll just slightly show like this. You see, I'm just adding a little shadow. So it's about really going into nuances. If there's a wrinkle or some kind of fold, it doesn't mean it should go for the actual like shadow color, you know? If it's a tiny detail, it will most likely be just slightly, barely noticeable change in value, a little bit like this. So I'm going for the lighting from the right, since there's this fireplace, as you mentioned, it's the main light source, while there's some extra stuff all over the place, but I assume torches are a lot darker, or torches. Are these torches when they're just hanging on the wall? Wall lights. They're probably a lot darker than a fireplace. So I'm just gonna start with something like this. You know, I think about the whole face as like a balloon shape, you know, and then on smaller scale, like there's a nose that casts a certain shadow. And a lot of the times, if you look at references with lighting from one side, you'll notice in here there will be this like triangle like this, that the other cheek is catching a little bit of that light because the nose is stops sticking out at the top part. That's why it's letting some light in. I noticed like most of submissions on Overpaint have one issue. Even if everything is painted as a painting, like most of it, some details will retain outlines in them, and one of them that are very consistently going on are the noses, because it's so hard to figure out how to render a nose at all. Kind of, if you remove the outlines, it just disappears. Like in anime, right? They either have an outline or nothing, and that leads to the nose being nothing. Because if they would have a lot of outlines on the nose, it would look too much, like too ugly, too strong, and that's what happens. That's why there are barely any noses in anime. Wise choice. But since this isn't anime, we can, you know, work with much more subtle values to make sure we show the geometry without making it look too strong or something. So yeah, that's my main thing in terms of shading and why things may look just not pretty enough comparing to the references or something. It's because when you're trying to show a detail and it's looking too strong, too harsh, try lowering the contrast. Instead of going with a super dark lines like this, try using very close values, like you see a little bit darker, and that's it. Now I'll slightly like increase the shading, the thickness of the upper eyelid. First of all, because like makeup, and secondly, just so she wouldn't be staring into the void like that, you know? It's also very nuanced. It's one thing that really, if you work with portraits and you are studying photos and everything, go much more nuanced, much more careful with much smaller amounts of things. Like you can see those details, but it's really hard to repeat them because you either go really strong or like not at all, a little bit. So lowering the eyelid a little bit changes everything completely. And yeah, changing the direction of that eye a little bit will make her actually look into the same direction with both eyes. I'll even use my smearing brush to move this eye around like that, like 1 pixel. And she's already looking somewhere in the same proximity. Not moving it too much, because right now she's kind of looking at something specific on the ceiling. And this way she's just looking into the sky, wondering about something. A lot of differences, like she's focused on something, she's dreaming, and here she's just really tired, I guess. So yeah, I would go with this direction. Generally, the likeness is really far in here, even with what I did. That just takes practice, and make sure you pay attention to those nuanced values to make sure things work much more carefully. So you would be able to actually, you know, copy things properly. Something like that, showing a little bit of that hair at the top, because she has a very tall forehead. Everyone has a very tall forehead in here. Very interesting. Did they choose these people that way or something? Like this only familiar to me actress that I still don't know the name of, she kind of has like an closer to an average forehead. Still kind of tall though, I guess, but others are really tall foreheads. Interesting. This stare is so intimidating. Battle face. So I'm gonna go ahead and try and like liquefy, I guess. But first, maybe I should... No, I don't think I'll be cutting them out of the background. I actually really like the background. Maybe I would shade some things down a bit to introduce stronger shadows, because everything is lit like in Wolfenstein. Like, there are some deep shadows over there, but they should also happen in details, you know? But yeah, generally the perspective of it and just the placement, the amount of details, like some details here, less in here, and generally everything is very, very balanced in that regard. I'm not sure about the cropping, maybe you did that afterwards, like there was more going on at the bottom, most likely, of course. So I'm not sure why you did that. The composition is quite weird, but I think you know about it. You just did the best you could, really wanting to remove the feet, maybe? You had problems with it or something? Also, a lot of empty floor maybe led you to doing that. And that's one thing that makes it much harder to draw feet and positions. One thing I would recommend doing is, like in the next group picture like that, is to make sure like the horizon line right now is over here. Just make it over here, below everyone's eye level. A lot. That's a much more heroic perspective, and that will lead to the floor being a lot more squished like this. And you will be just painting one foot over the other, sort of like without all of this will be barely visible. You will be mostly switching to like reflections instead of painting all these tiles, because at a strong angle we get more reflections than anything, and it will be just this pretty looking floor like this with reflections and such. And then just objects, you know, without all this stretching perspective, it will be much more horizontal and like much better looking. It's a much better pose for heroic shots, for sure. It solves a lot of problems at the same time. Pretty much all the characters will be standing on like a flat line instead of having to draw the feet that are like stretching in the perspective, and they all would look much more epic thanks to that kind of angle. So I'm seeing there's a certain like trapezoid shape of the face. So this part is really like going, like falling off a little bit, that eye. When this actress has her face very like rectangular, it's not going like that. So that's one thing to fix. Also, I would increase this bit of hair a little bit. And yeah, don't be afraid to shade down one side of the face. Again, not with a too strong of a shadow, but like with this shadow. Because, you know, it's under this hair, so it makes sense to make it like this. I would make this hair definitely not just stopping exactly around the shoulder guard, because that's just a perspective trick your mind played on itself. So it should be going further, because it felt like this side of the hair was much shorter than this one. And yeah, again, these ugly lines on top of the nostrils, just not a thing. If the person really has it strong and it makes sense with the lighting for some reason, make them happen, but with, again, much lower contrasts. She really reminds me of Urokir right now. This is Urokir. I'm not sure. It almost feels like it's intentional to make her stare at us like this, but I'm just gonna lower that eyelid a little bit so I wouldn't be that afraid of her. And I can see the nose generally should be much shorter, so I guess I'll just lift this whole part. There we go. I finally found kind of the proportions of the real face. So really, that side was really falling off. Oh my god, the stare. You see the problem. You need to add some shadow and lower the eyelids a little bit. And yeah, that chin she was really missing that chin, so I added that in, and it's looking a lot more natural now. I'm trying to make as little changes as possible to show the most important things and the most useful things to do. That would be useful right now for you in here without like going with it. You have to improve everything, because that's no fun. So yeah, the thing with faces, it's a really cool practice, especially if you have this thing that everything's lit from the fireplace on the right. Just light up one half of the face, literally just shade down another half. And I can see you have some rim lighting here from those torches over there, and it's totally awesome, and it will work great together, so it will look like this. And generally getting darker at the top. What's interesting, you can really darken the top plane of things, because at the top there's just this dark ceiling and all the lights are on the eye level or below eye level, which means the top plane should really be dark actually. It will make things look a lot more like we're actually inside of this place, this tavern, and not outdoors somewhere. And that means like the top of the nose, on this face at least, because it's like tilted upwards, you know? Like it looks a bit muddy because I'm doing it fast, like it just needs some more saturation there. All that stuff. But yeah, you see, this is like weirdly lit from the top when there's nothing in the top. That's why faces stand out so much in this lighting. And this brings them back into the reality. And in here, there's actually a lot of darkness should be going on since there's this hood casting that massive shadow. It looks like a pretty big hood. And even here, like that. Oh man, that floor rendering is probably the best improvement. That, like, really, if you don't know what to do with the floor, reflect everything. That always works awesome. And then on top, you can, you know, like, add little dirt or something. It's so easy to make things look awesome. Look at that. It's like you can count the amount of strokes I made. It's so cool. Like the easiest thing to do. And, you know, block that reflection with all these things in between. Amazing. So yeah, let's apply all of that lighting thing, since you specifically mentioned lighting. Apply it on this bear. But really, he's just gonna be really dark comparing to what you have. So there's like a big violet arm, or like something that's holding this guy in midair. And that's what's going on actually. I haven't really noticed it. I think he was kind of behind something, and that's his feet. They're too short. They're like hands. They should be bigger. But of course, you know, proportion issues and a whole bunch of other issues are no surprise, considering this painting is just such a huge undertaking. It's insanely overwhelming to work on, I'm pretty sure. So at first I'm just darkening his lighting, the bear's lighting, from the fireplace only. So I'm only removing this fireplace light, and then I'll probably add some violet lighting from this thing, and it'll look absolutely epic, if I'll be able to do it anyway. Maybe some of that rim lighting, you know how fur really shines, or fur or hair, anything like that, really lights up the silhouette when there's a rim lighting from the back. Actually, there's rim lighting on that side as well, but it's not supposed to be this bright though, since the fireplace is much brighter. It would be like still this color, but it's only darker than the fireplace light. But yeah, like silhouette in this case is a great place to show that fur detail without having to do too much in the middle. Like that's like secondary to do in the middle. Just don't want that bow to disappear. Maybe some shine on this thing as well. Since the bear is getting really dark, we need to go for the opposite contrast. We need to show all the bright things that these details can introduce. Now let's see how this will work. I'll make it a bit warmer because the bear is red-haired. But yeah, I'm generally having a hard time, mostly because it's an overpaint. And with the composition this complex, each character and the background need to be in a separate layer. That's pretty important here, I think. At least for the beginning, you know, when you're shading things down, and right now I'm like changing shading drastically, so big things need to introduce new big gradients with completely removing old ones. That stuff, like if you would have this in separate layers, it would be very convenient. Kind of like that, you see it's starting to show through. I actually should have darkened the bear even stronger before introducing the violet, but I think this is already kind of working out. And yeah, of course, all of, like, I only show separate tiny examples, but everything can be shaded from the right, not just the faces. There's just so much work to do. This is, as I said, it's a huge composition. I'm also keeping the lighting from this magic stuff. So yes, something like this I would go with, only a lot more carefully. And one thing to remember generally when you're thinking about lighting the place is that the further away it is from the light source, it gets darker and darker. So the top of that ceiling is probably gonna be pretty dark. You know, and even if the beginning of some angles of these wooden planks would be brighter, they will go like fade away into dark like that. So yeah, a general reshade is kind of like this. I would do a lot more, of course, but I just have no time for that, because this is absolutely massive. So here we are. Also, I'm seeing Nicolas Cage in here a lot right now. Third patient is Matt Parkin. Hello, Matt. Hi, Borrow. Sorry if I'm late for the month. I'll resub again in April. Don't you worry about that. I'm late for the month as well. I really struggle with telling a story and creating emotion in my work. I've tried to lead the eye around and create a contrast with lighting, but I fear I've overdone it in some places and underdone it in others. I also don't know where to render fully and where to leave less rendered, so I end up losing a lot of time just catching rocks. Sounds relatable, right? Let's see what I can do. Alright, Matt, so we're seeing here giant eggs of some kind of creature in this huge cave, and our hero found them, I guess that's what's going on. So the thing with spreading detail properly, it kind of goes naturally with the lighting, I would say that would be one main thing. So right now, usually when you build a composition, you need to make sure that the light is showing what's important, and in this case you're kind of doing it, so that's generally introducing some light into the scene, but our main thing is going on right here from this torch or the magic thing. It's really low resolution, so it's hard to tell. So I would maybe spread a bit more because that spot on the floor was a bit too sharp. And that's the thing, the more light you can see, the more attention it requires. So if we know that some of the stones, like anything that's rectified from the floor, from the ground, will be catching that light. And that's how you're showing that this is not a perfect floor in some kind of business building, but actually just, you know, a bumpy cave floor. So a lot of these will be going on, but also they're, of course, casting shadows behind themselves. So that's what's going on. They're catching some light, making things brighter, but also after that, like away from the light source, there will be shadows like this. And generally, you probably understand this, but you didn't do it here because you weren't spreading the work properly, like evenly. This is the main focal point. This is where the character is. And they're holding the light. And this is what's going on the floor right next to the light. I'm not gonna be doing that further ahead, you know, but I introduced certain plane in here around the character using the angles from the light and everything. So now, like, this is what the viewer wants to look at, you know? The definition of this light around the character and how the character is in that light. This is the important part. But one thing I can tell you for sure is that you need to define everything enough. And right now, like in your original picture, I really feel like you added some very sharp specific details on the ground, but then in here it's kind of left so blank that it almost doesn't feel like a defined horizontal surface. It's like vague, almost like turns into a cloud in here. And that's where I would add a little bit of those horizontal lines generally to show that, you know, this is the ground. And yeah, by the way, the further we go away from that torch, the longer these shadows will be, which makes things look absolutely amazing. This is like really giving that Diablo 4 vibes. I don't play Diablo, but it kind of looks awesome. And yeah, just work with what's in the light and what's catching some highlights. So in here, you caught some of those highlights. You could have introduced a little bit more detail in here, because this is where the eye will be attracted to as well. Tiny bit, something goopy in here maybe from that creature who laid eggs here or something. I don't know, not necessary. It's like a little detail that will be interesting to the eye, but at the same time it's not important, so I'm lowering contrast on it. It's like this game like this of balancing things around. In here I would definitely go with more like the silhouette game. There's like, if here we're catching the highlight, and here is probably a better bet to go with silhouettes. And it's gonna be more mysterious in a way. We can still definitely see the silhouette of this egg really well, but we don't have to do much about it. We can really add some stronger highlights on the egg. I feel like that really like overexposed lighting over there can really introduce a lot more shines like that on the surface of the egg. But of course, it's about what kind of eggs you want to show, you know, maybe these ones are very rough on the surface. But that's, you know, one of those things where you introduce contrast where things are important, and this is an egg, and this is the story about finding eggs, so why not catch some highlight from that magic and or torch in the character's hand. Yeah, like this egg right here, careful values on its specific round but not spherical shape are really important. So make sure you show that proper gradient at a proper, like slightly from the front but mostly from the side angle. And even a little highlight will definitely send a message of an egg. And you see the highlight is a very high contrast thing. This is a reflection, not just lighting. And that's where we can show that there are tiny dirt bumps going on. I went for like translucency on this egg. Probably overdid it quite a lot. It shouldn't, like, generally this egg should be almost pitch black. Eggs of this size, of this thickness, the shells, like they won't be translucent all that much. So yeah, I guess that'll be it. The main thing I would take away from this is look for the highlights and brightly lit parts. And if they don't coincide with the things that you want to make important in the picture, maybe rethink the placement of the lights. The lighting needs to be in different places to make sure it lights things properly according to their importance. And yeah, overall, just to technically spread details evenly, try to work with like a certain size of the brush first on everything, and then make the brush a bit smaller and work on almost everything, but you will feel where things don't need to be improved and somewhere they do need to be improved. And of course, also a great tool to improve this workflow of, properly adding details is shape design. When you start working with just small little bits of details, you already need to make sure you're adding good, confident, shapes that dictate certain looks, certain dynamics, and storytelling. Like, is this like an evil, spiky kind of cave or not, and that will dictate the shape. And already with these small amount of strokes, it kind of looks already cool, even though it's not detailed. And it will be much easier for you to keep it this way. The main problem of not being able to properly detail things is because you don't make them pretty when they're not detailed. And you need to make them pretty always. Even like the first strokes on things need to look cool. They're simplified, they're not exactly the complex, super rough shapes that you're going for, and they look kind of cartoonish because of that. They're big, simple shapes. But don't worry about it, you have to start with those, then breaking them down into more complex shapes if necessary will be really easy. And there's a good chance you won't even want to do that on many areas in the painting because they'll already be cool as they are. So yeah, that's just a little demo. It's not like that particular part of the cave was worse than others, but you see there's much more message in this shape than in any of these shapes. They're very random and not necessarily fortunate. You were going for a realistic look instead of making sense out of these shapes. They take up a whole lot of space on this painting. They need to be cool and support the mood of the place. So yeah, you see, I spent specifically a lot of time rendering this area, this egg, and the edges of this egg, shaping up a good silhouette on it. And that's mostly what I did, and it changed a whole lot of things. Also, I would add maybe a little bit of those highlighting reflection things on the floor in here, just to define this floor a bit more. Since it's not a flat surface, it will have all these bumps that will also be catching this light from over here. Patient number 4 is Wave DZN. Hello there, Wave. Hey Boro, thank you for having me. Here's my art piece, Big Bobby. No relation to anything at all, just random character. Okay, I'll try to submit a more painterly piece next month. That is not a requirement at all. I personally have a lot of trouble with the following. 1. Making the pieces dynamic. 2. Folds, clothing. 3. Proportions. I find it difficult to foreshorten while drawing muscular characters. I brought his left leg back and brought his left arm more to the front, as well as bringing the right arm back. You mean, his left arm. Well, I can see what you meant. No problem with that. But yeah, sometimes it's hard to understand things, especially if they need fixing, so thanks for doing that. I have trouble showcasing that the right arm is being bent. It sort of looks like it's a small arm. Yeah, that's exactly what it looks like. I'm always fond of having a lot of folds in the pieces I make. I think it's a really cool aesthetic, but I feel like I don't understand folds properly enough or know how to render them. I'm trying to stylize my pieces. I really like drawing muscular characters, but I feel like that often brings disproportion to my artwork. Do you have any pointers on this regard? Thank you for your time, Boro. Hopefully I'm not too late. You are not, and here we go. Alright, Wave, let's see what I can do here with a very different art style from what I have, but I think we can give it a good old try. So first things first, let's see what we can do about, making a better impression of the foreshortening and the proper angles. This one is too much, but the one that's supposed to be here. So let's start in here. Actually, the knee is also a problem, but let's just start with the shoulder. So we can see there's pretty much the upper part is just this little thing, And then like all of this is supposed to be the forearm, right? So we need to make sure that the viewer understands that whatever's going on here, this is black outlines, right? Whatever's going on here is only this this part. What is it called? The upper joint of the shoulder elbow. I don't know, but this part, right? And I assume also the character is tilted forward, so we'll be seeing a certain outline of his very masculine chest. One way or another, it will be in more of a wrinkly fashion or whatever, but nonetheless. So we'll have really strong wrinkle action going on everywhere in here, but like not in here. This one is relaxing like that, because that leg goes downwards. And since this forearm is supposed to be going forward, and I assume the hand is lowered, if not, that you just need to take a screenshot of my hand like this, however you want it to be, like this, only this part is super thin, it doesn't fit that character, but you get the point. Also very veiny, I just drank a lot of coffee. But yeah, we need to convey that this forearm is coming forward at us like this, right? So that's a very thick brush for that drawing. But I think the way we need to be doing it is to make sure we emphasize the details on this part, because obviously, like, let's think about it this way. If we remove the details like this, and like this, whatever. There's nothing wrong with this. It's totally possible for this to sort of happen, you know? Although it would require an insane stretching of this part to hide it the way that the shoulder will be only exposing like this part of the forearm. Seems like it's a bit hard to make that happen, but nonetheless, I can see this to not be too much of a problem. So at this point right here, everything is normal. What's not normal is the way you show details inside of it. So the best way to show that this cylinder is facing forward is to show the details on it that would dictate that it's facing forward. Like these lines should be going on. And that's like a super popular advice that all of the artists give in terms of making sure your foreshortening works. So this is the kind of cylindrical shape details we're supposed to be going for here. And so it will just be a whole lot of just that. Well, maybe not as perfect, you know, if you wanna have some wrinkle-specific things that are not repeating like that. But the point is that they still need to make sure they're curving away strongly like this. There, you see this is really like flat. It feels like you always show clothing details like they're just right in front of you like this, and you need to make sure you curve things around. Honestly, if you really wanna make sure this works, just put on some clothes and make pictures of yourself doing this while wearing some kind of long sleeve thing. That wrinkles a lot, you know? It probably would take like, I don't know, silky kind of clothing that would make a whole lot of small wrinkles. But actually, the same problem I can see here, because it feels like the arm sort of doesn't go forward, but like curves downwards, like is going downwards. Instead of at us. Well, it is actually going downwards if we're seeing the top plane of the fist here. So maybe that was kind of the point. So I'm not sure exactly how to go about it, because like clearly you're going for the fist going downwards, right? So maybe he's like going to hit the ground, maybe. Also, is this me? Like, just say it straight. Is this me or not? Big Bobby, sure. Bory. There. So yeah, you see, generally you're going for kind of curving it like this, but you just do the same angle everywhere, just a little bit, like you get the point. Well, no, they don't. They don't get the point, because if the angle is really strong, this is the curvature that needs to be in here. This needs to have like showing the top plane. This is the direction that it should be taking. And it's really important to do that. And yeah, another thing, like you're stylizing, but I can see you're still like shading things, like they're reacting to a certain light source at the top. And if you're doing that, I feel like you need to make sure you upgrade your thinking about it a little bit. So if this plane is facing upwards and this one is like forward, that means this one will be brighter than this one altogether. So I would considerably darken this whole part like that, only I'll use like darken mode or something. So that's like also a very important thing to do, to make sure that generally shapes go forward or downwards. Like that's what we use lighting for, to understand where things are. We as humans, I mean, when we look at things. But I can see you think more with the lines instead of like shading and colors, and like I get it. Let's go with that. Like for that, you need to make sure you dictate that shape with the shape of the wrinkles. They're supposed to be more like this. But of course, it's more complicated than that, because we don't want to have, you know, an arm with just a lot of lines like that on it. That's not wrinkles, right? Wrinkles are more complicated. And in fact, that's the thing about wrinkles. If you have a bent knee, most likely it won't have wrinkles on the knee itself. And I understand you really like wrinkles, but really the bent knee means it's using up all that cloth that used to be wrinkles. Like that's why clothing has wrinkles on it, because there's extra cloth, so we would be able to easily bend our limbs and everything. So when they're bent, they're using all that cloth, and it won't be, you know, all wrinkled up. The wrinkled knee makes little sense. It's hard to explain why that would be happening. So yeah, we need to show that stretch, and the stretch is yeah, no wrinkles. I'm sorry. I know you like them, but in order for them to actually look like wrinkles, they need to act like wrinkles. And if there's tension, they shouldn't be around. But there can be a lot of wrinkles in here, because that's where the opposite is going on. A lot of cloth is pressed together. But it definitely ends right here, because that's where a lot more surface is happening. So yeah, you see shading, direction of wrinkles on this part, and actually like as little wrinkles as possible on the actual knee area, because we're using that cloth on the increased surface of the bent knee. And this, like, it looks like just a pipe that goes sideways like that, and that's it. Maybe widening a little bit for some reason, but this is like sticking out. You can like immediately see it. And I still think it looks very much wrinkly. Well, this is kind of facing almost towards us completely, so this is good enough. Well, this kind of action, there's enough of that cylindrical distortion. In here, like right here, you started really well with that, which is actually really cool, and I think you should do that more. Like in here, it should have been done as well. By the way, this should be maybe even stronger, if that's necessary. I feel like it already looks correct, but maybe even stronger. Like at the very edge, it's really important to have that strong curvature like that. And yeah, that's me just shading brighter at the top plane, so it would look consistent with the shading of the rest of the arm. And yeah, in here, at certain point, like there's the thing that I'm not sure what this spike of the cloth is. Like it looks good, but it makes little sense on that part of the body. It should be like kind of on this side and also look a lot more like just these cylindrical lines like this, because this is where you bend the arm, not the other way around. So it will have some of those wrinkles over here. This little part right here looks like straight from Marvel comic books, real nice. But later on it becomes like really flat and also out of scale. That's one thing I should say as well. These wrinkles are of the same scale as they are here. Well, in the original as well, right? This and this, if I would just switch them around, they would look of the same size. And that's weird, because this is a much smaller body part, a lot closer to the camera. So it shouldn't be so tiny wrinkled. Like, it's still wrinkles, but there should be just of a bigger scale. And honestly, it's a bit hard to, like, I understand this art style and everything, but I don't have practice in it. I don't know how to make sense of such an insane amount of wrinkles. Like, when you make wrinkles on clothing, the best way to go about it is to look for points of tension and points of compression. We know here's the compression, so there will be lines like this. We know in here is hanging down, so it's like gravity tension, that's where we're going downwards. And like this is tension and this is compression, and this is how you go about it, right? In here, like compression, because there's extra cloth at the bottom hitting that shoe. Also, you lost the opportunity to add a lot of wrinkles in here because this is where he bent his shoulder forward, and that's the wrinkles. While on this side it's the opposite situation. There should be no wrinkles because that arm is going behind and everything's straight. Even like you can add lines like that actually. I can see in the texture you sort of have this kind of lines that are going that way. You can actually emphasize them if you want. So yeah, that alone will make your wrinkles look better. It will support anatomy, geometry, and foreshortening, and it will make things a lot more dynamic because this now looks like a strong stretch, you know, and this is a strong compression, so he is forcefully pushing his arm forward, you know, that kind of stuff. Wrinkles actually help with that a lot, but they need to be, you know, drawn with meaning, like they should be functional. And yeah, in here, gotta make sure you keep in mind that this is a much smaller surface, a lot closer to the camera. So it's all a lot more messy than whatever you did, but you know, the stylization part, I think you can handle it way better than what I would do. Yeah, I feel like this is facing forward much more than the original. So yeah, what's interesting, these wrinkles right here, they're like everything around here is more like folds, right? They're folds, and these are actual wrinkles, meaning the cloth has been pressed in that direction a lot, and now it's like permanent little ridges or something, right? So it's actually, it wouldn't have wrinkles otherwise, it's just that it's like, it needs ironing in that area or something. Just because that's where the arm is being bent a lot, that's why they remain in there. But on this side, a little bit of wrinkles will appear because that's where that extra cloth from bending the elbow would be assembled or even stretched the cloth a little bit, and then when you straighten the arm you get some wrinkles going on in here. Wrinkles like this between the chest parts would also make sense. And you know, with that thing taken care of more or less, I can't even tell if you have a lot of actual proportion issues. Like, the way I see it, everything is pretty much appropriate for the foreshortening that we have going on. Also, I think this leg is also probably it's like bent, and then the leg goes down like that in there or something. And because it's bent, we'll probably have different wrinkles in here going on as well. So I'll default it to just the basic shape. And then I'll be making this stretch, because from one knee to another we have this kind of stretch of the cloth. So this, like, still a lot of wrinkles, they just should be going a different direction there. So yeah, I guess this will be it. I don't really feel like a lot of things need to be fixed. One piece of advice on how to make the patterns of wrinkles, but it's actually even kind of hard to find a good place. I guess let's do it right here, because otherwise everything is very foreshortened and has very strong compression or stretching. If it's more relaxed, like we have the situation when there's just a lot of free cloth resting over like the shoe in here, right? This is the place where we have an opportunity for that pretty looking checkerboard pattern of the wrinkles. So it goes like, you make a wrinkle, a wrinkle, a wrinkle in the middle, a wrinkle, a wrinkle, a wrinkle in the middle, and then sort of try and make sense out of it a little bit. And it kind of happens as well with the compression in here, like sometimes a wrinkle would happen in the middle like this. It's sort of due to the same logic a little bit. Sort of like that. The only thing is, I don't really succeed in following your stylization of very sharp detailing, so I don't know, it looks a lot softer. I guess somewhere in the details it should be much sharper for this thing to look more fitting. So yeah, something like this. Next patient is Corn Draws. Hi Corn, hi Boro, and everybody else. I am new to the family and this is my first Overpaint contribution, so I hope I am doing this right. You very much are. I'm still very new to painting, started a year and a half ago, and I am still struggling with a lot of the basics. The theme of this piece is the inner demon we all have. The ugly entity that keeps us locked in our own head and keeps us from achieving the things we wish for. There were a lot of things I struggled with, so feel free to point out the most obvious things from a professional's view. Oh, and by the way, I totally cheated and the wall ornaments in the background are just photobashed. Those ones. They look pretty good. I have no problem with that. Thank you for your time and all the best for you. Greetings, Corn, aka Marcus. Alright, Corn Draws. Really cool shot. I have one thing to start with the composition. I'm looking at it, obviously this is a very two-dimensional shot. It's all very sideways, very ornamental generally. But that's not a problem. You probably chose this angle because it's easier to work with, but that's not a mistake. If it's easier for you to work with it, then good choice. But one thing I would probably fix would be changing the pose of our characters or positioning. Location, I don't know. So I'm gonna select this tiny little person that's being harassed by their inner demon, and I'm gonna remove them from here. And yeah, I'll put them over here, and that's where the chain would go. And that's what I think will make things a lot better in regards of the composition, because otherwise, it's not that we need them to be walking to the left, right? If anything, things going to the left are a bit unpleasant in general. If something's going somewhere, it should be going to the right. This way, we sort of balance the composition, because in here it's balanced in regards of the wings, right? They're in the center, the main spot of the picture is in the center, but all the main parts, all the faces are facing to the left, and only all the important details are on the left. And this way, we sort of bring the balance a bit to the perfect center, which I think generally the composition is symmetrical. So our main person being in the center it tells us that the story is about them and this whole thing is happening to them. So it works much better that way. And another thing in symbolically, it's better because the person was sort of going to the right, but that thing is dragging them back. So that's also cool. So I think this will work much better. And generally, I really like the thing that the person is exactly in the center. It kind of looks really cool. They now even have the name tag underneath. And yeah, in little details, I would probably, I don't know, fix these arms, the hands. Thing is, they sort of have their fingers sticking upwards, but in that position they would be we would be mostly seeing the top planes of the hands. Unless you of course meant something with this being dried out, bony whatevers. Now this guy is all the way awesome. But the main big part of the picture is wings and the dress. We can really make them a lot more interesting maybe. But that's of course, highly subjective or something. So this kind of gesture in the shoulder of the wing or whatever. And then generally, I believe wings usually go from here. I don't know how much of that really matters to you in the design of this wing, but you can really build from that. This is a more interesting structure maybe like that. You went with a very soft edges, but maybe these would work? Again, this is just assumptions, but I really feel like, this kind of thing, like thinking through the shape design a bit more, because the main part of the picture that took the most of it in surface is just a bunch of like random spots. They're too chaotic and non-defined for something that's like in the middle, and it's supposed to, make the whole picture work, like make it interesting, but it feels like you never got to it to actually put something interesting in this part. I would maybe go much brighter here, since this is at the top and seems like the lighting is coming from the top. It would dictate a really cool effect of like some kind of light shooting from the top. And that's why this central part is really bright. Yeah, I'm gonna use like a very transparent brush for these wings from now on, because really it was too rough. Maybe a little hint on like a cobweb, but like not really. I made the double-sided shading on the columns like this. I think it will work a bit better, because this way we can make it more dramatic and dark, while at the same time not lose the right edge of the columns. I feel like it's more fitting. Although this way we're kind of implying that there's more light outside of the composition, which is not as dark. It usually, this kind of stories imply that there's complete darkness everywhere. But I don't know, I think it should work. It's not a strong light, it's fine, it's dark enough. But yeah, these are my thoughts. I would maybe make a little curve in the wing like this, so it would be casting a shadow on itself, adding some depth to all of this, because otherwise the wing is completely just flat like this, and it should be like curving. Yeah, this is very different now. Hope this was useful. I think the main and best fix I did was this, and the rest is just, some ideas on how to make things a bit more elaborate. Okay, so yeah, this is the progress. Next patient is Clay Foster. Hi Clay. Hi Boro, I hope you're well. I want you to know that the people of New Zealand stand with Ukraine. On behalf of Ukraine, thank you. This art might be a little simpler than most. I would like to focus on character design and the rendering skills necessary to show it off. Every month I submit work to the Character Design Challenge on Facebook. The standards are very high there, and so often entries are declined. Here's a recent unsuccessful piece of mine, featuring a bear knight protecting a young girl. I would be keen on any and all advice on how to improve my character design and associated rendering skills. Thank you. Alright, Clay, so one thing I want to do right away is probably zoom out a little bit and straighten things up, because I don't think the tilt of the camera would bring a lot of message, since it's not strong enough anyway. So let's see, in terms of character design, I feel like in here it's important to have the expression, like showing the character, because design of his outfit I think is pretty much flawless. I'll render one of the sides of the blade a bit darker than the other one, because otherwise I won't be able to think about anything else. I feel like this is a good idea. So the pose, I would make it a bit different. I wonder how I should approach this in terms of overpaint. Now, first of all, I want this bear to really show some care for the little girl. So it would be a bit more of this shape, like covering, like a roof or something. And this arm needs to stick out more. I think we need a bit more width to the picture, and so I'll grab this hand and move it over here, raised a bit higher, so the bad guys would really get the message. And yeah, we're sticking it forward. So we got a little bit of that. Now, I feel like this bear has very flimsy legs. Maybe we could, maybe it's somewhat close to the real bear, but I don't care. Do you guys care? I don't care. I feel like they need to be like massive legs. Because he's barely standing on those little things. And the girl's feet could be much closer to each other, and that tilt could be much stronger as well. I'll make the eyes brighter, because they're just gray, really, really gray. Now they're really, really glowing, like headlights of a car. And I'm gonna keep the nose the way it is, just because, well, you obviously decided to go with that. It's your right for a mistake to go with that kind of nose, but okay. Poor girl. So yeah, if the belly is hanging over that side, it should probably keep going in all dimensions. I'm not making any bigger conclusions like, well, you need to approach it this way, because I have no idea. I never worked on a picture like this. I'm just doing one thing at a time. Also, I feel like these ears could dictate a little bit of a focus. And the eyebrows, they're low, but the eyes are like separate from it. I feel like they would benefit from really lowering the eyebrows over them, because that's really, there it is. Warp. And let's do a little bit of this. But yeah, not too strong of a curve, mostly just lowering, because a strong curve is like the evil, I guess. But just lowering means like, I'm disappointed in these folks. And even like add a little bit of the shadow from that stuff, because what's the point if not the shadow? Oh, that's a bit too much butt on that little girl. I don't know what she's doing with that other arm in there, but I'm not gonna question it. So yeah, something like that. Before was like this, then different cropping and the sword rendering, I guess. And yeah, just changing the shapes, making them more confident and more focused on the emotion of what's going on. The shape of the pose of the girl is a big one. Closer feet and stronger bending. Expressive curvatures of the arms, covering the girl like this and raising the sword a little bit, not pushing it too close to himself, but actually pointing it towards the enemy. And yeah, eyebrows, they need to be touching the eyes, so they would actually look like they're over the eyes, like angry. Because right now, like, he's almost looking afraid and completely disoriented comparing to my version. My version is a lot more focused and like he really means it. And this is like, wait, what? What happened? And I don't know why the eyes were so gray. I think because the girl is like in the shadow from the bear a little bit, but it still doesn't explain why the eyes are of the same brightness as the skin. The skin would be darker as well, so I don't know. And I don't know, I don't feel like we need to show the shadow from the bear on the girl, because that would mean, like, it doesn't have to happen. And if we choose it to happen, that means like the bear is intimidating to the girl, casting a creepy shadow on her. So keeping things bright like this, I think they work better. And yeah, much stronger feet, because this is like, is he a chocolate bear that's melting? And this is like much more confident. Maybe not as anatomically close to a bear, but And yeah, some rendering, I don't know, here and there, just paying attention to the values. The usual stuff, I guess. You can watch any overpaint and yeah, that shading thing. Mostly, I think like 90% of things you can improve with this picture is in the shape design, in gestures of the characters, their expressions. And the final patient for today is the Uncanny Cryptid. Hi, the Uncanny Cryptid. Hi, Borrow. I hope all is well. I've been a viewer for about 6 years or so, and I am very excited for the chance to share this with you. This art is of my Dungeons and Dragons wizard character named Alexander Boneflare. With this piece, the main goal was to have an intense stare to the character and have a sense of moodiness. I've been struggling to find that to work on at this stage of the painting. I tried to keep my values and anatomy as accurate as I can, but I just feel like it isn't as striking or intense as image I hoped it to be after my rendering. Got it. Don't be afraid to tear this piece apart. I'm looking forward to any advice and insights you have to offer, and I hope you have an awesome day. Thank you for your awesome content and all the best. The Uncanny Cryptid, aka Dylan. Alright Dylan, let's have a look if I can improve anything at all in this one. So yeah, this is really cool, very nice anatomy and very careful values. Very nice to look at. As I always say, like, values are really important, and this is why, like, just the fact that the values are very careful and nuanced is just a pleasure to look at it just because of that. Now, a few things I would improve. First of all, I noticed, like, you have this anime style thing where the second eye has to not show up, but really I can see that it should start somewhere around here, so it looks kind of weird. Also, the shadow over that eye is incredibly sharp, and that's maybe the only place where there's such a sharp shadow, so I would work a little bit on that part. It's like you really wanted to skip working on that eye because you just didn't plan it, and it feels kind of weird. Maybe the character literally doesn't have an eye, I'm not sure. There's this character, I wonder if he's one-eyed. I kind of doubt that, because that would look kind of weird. That is a very strange search result. Wait, is this like an original character? Maybe there's a typo? I don't know, but I can't look it up. I'm gonna assume that the character is supposed to have an eye, the second one. Kinda like that. I think it should work. Aside from that, I would naturally start adding some stronger high contrast shadows in certain parts that I feel like deserve it. But at the same time, maybe this artwork actually has this cool feeling to it because there's a lot of like this bouncing light and nothing gets too dark anywhere. And no, you know what? I added that and it totally works. So yeah, in such deep parts, I think some stronger shadows are definitely justified. Like, I get that most parts should be really light because this character is like very white, but there's certain depth that should be going on in certain parts. So yeah, I'm doing this thing that you're probably generally familiar with. It's about working on values, so paying attention to those angles. And one thing about it, like I can see in the anatomy sometimes it's showing through, like in here. With a curvature like this, you made this highlight because in here we're facing the light source, and you made in here, like the highlight, the brighter surface, right? That's because we're also facing here. But thing is, we're not facing here, but we're facing here again. So the bottom part of any kind of dent or inner curvature should also get bright when it gets downwards. And that's what gives it that very realistic look. If you do the right gradients, you see it looks very shiny and cool. This may be the first time I've ever done this kind of shading on a hair, but here we are. And yeah, I'm specifically working around the eye and, you know, increasing contrast on areas over here because this is the place that we should pay attention to. So you see higher contrast around the face. I know how much reference work you did with this one, like how much of things that I'm fixing were actually not in a real world reference. but I don't care. Since I don't know anyway, I believe this makes sense. Also, the highlight on the nose is like from the front for some reason. It probably should be more like from over there. Also, another area in here a little bit is kind of weird. I generally notice this anatomy is a bit fantasy-like, but like this little highlight in here, this is a concave highlight as well, where the inwards thing gives the shine, but that's too much. And yeah, I don't think I need to talk about the cutout. You obviously know how to work around it, just redo it. So yeah, pretty much these are the changes I did. Some deeper shadows, higher contrast on different parts of shading on the eye, on the hair around the eye. So I feel like that will make that stare more present. Obviously, you want it to be this kind of like somewhat bored, somewhat, you know, this confident and striking in this kind of calm fashion stare. So I won't be like opening the eye more or something like that, because that's, I think, definitely not the point. But yeah, there we go. And this is it. That'll be all the submissions for today. Thank you guys so much for your very unique and different submissions every time, and so much more of awesome stuff to come in the next video. So yeah, looking forward to working on that. I usually say, if any of you guys want me to overpaint your picture like this, the link to my Patreon page is in the end of this video, but I won't be saying that this time because I actually unpublished the overpaint here, because I really need to keep up with the submissions that you guys keep sending at me. I'm still only like 3/4 through the submissions of March. We have 6 more to go, and then we'll already have 5 submissions for April and already 2 submissions for May. So I'm just gonna go ahead and try to get it all done and then unlock the tier. So if you're watching this in the future, you can probably go ahead and visit the Patreon page and submit the picture with the message. I'll read the message and overpaint the picture in that brighter future of ours. But for now, this is it. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye! Feels good. Feels good to actually start doing things consistently. Or just more than very little. I don't know. There's something good about this.